what is important for how kids learn, what is important for their future, for the kind of futures that we see that they have, and what does that mean for our teaching?
We envision teachers doing everything perfect the whole time. We're humans as well, and it's 8 hours a day. If we're trying X amount of things differently, you're bound to have hiccups or failures, if you want to call them. What can you learn from them? What can you adapt with? And I think it's a good role model for kids. If they're seeing failure, they'll become more comfortable with failure.
We probably as teachers need to do a better job of helping parents understand the importance of failure and what it is and what it isn't.
We are asking a lot of our teachers today. They grew up in the industrial era education system that was completely different from what we are asking them to transition to for the needs of 21st century learners. That's really hard because the way that they were trained, their experience, what they've had is very different from what we're asking for their students. And the world that those students are going to face is totally different than anything we can even imagine at this point.
The interesting thing about this program is we're kind of hoping that it's something that you may be able to bring to your classrooms later on.
Shift Lab is professional learning like you've never experienced before. So it's an opportunity for educators to shift into a learner perspective and be immersed, get hands-on, and really experience what it's like to take a risk in a new environment.
We're making a piece of art,
Exactly.
not using our hands to paint. We need to create something to do the art.
It's
better!
The Shift Lab 1 year program has a lot of different pieces that come together. There's a summer intensive, so they actually give up a week of their summer to come here and work 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. with us. Super busy, hands-on, learning from lots of different content experts here at Spark. And there's workshops throughout the year on Saturdays, so it doesn't impede with student learning. And they work on what we call design declarations.
My name is Shauna Pascoe and I teach at the Calgary Girls School, and I've been there since 2008. Shift Lab is amazing. It's just been so much fun. Like it's like being at summer camp. And I've gotten so much inspiration and so many awesome ideas for what I want to do when I go back to school. I don't think very many of us, when we came in on the first day, were sort of chatting and we're like, I don't really know what's going to happen. So everything surprised me.
Take a minute to reflect about if you were to design a creative space, what would it look like for you?
My name is Jenny Lee Jones. I teach at the Calgary Girls School, and I've been at that school for the last 3 years. I chose to come to Shift Lab and sign up for this week because I thought it was a pretty great way to change my practice a little bit. At our school, we are really inquiry-based in the way we approach learning, and I knew that Shift Lab would offer me some more tools to maybe put in that bucket. I think that if we can get students to a place where they're sort of embracing one another's failures, then we've probably gotten to where we need to be.
Today we're going to go on a field trip.
I'm Adam. I've been teaching for 10 years, 4 years at Chestermere and 6 years in Singapore. We get to go outside, we get to play, we get to at least be out in nature, right? Because interacting, and it's fantastic in there, but this is just more engaged. You look at everybody around you, they're all talking, discussing, they're like little kids again, looking through a magnifying glass. So we thought we'd make an interactive display. And so now we have water. Does this all make sense?
Yes.
It's a shift in how I'm approaching my teaching, how I'm approaching even my learning as a teacher. I think they really try to hammer home different ways of doing things. So I find each day is such an inspiration, step by step by step, kind of building up to hopefully when we start teaching next week, right?
It's September and school is back in session. It's time to see Shift Lab practices in action.
So hopefully you can pick up lots of great ideas that you can take into your program this morning.
We are at TELUS Spark with 2 classes of the grade 8 girls from Calgary Girls School. We're here today because we're participating in a pilot program that Spark is starting for all sorts of grades.
I want you guys to design some sketches. So a sketch is something quick and rapid. It doesn't have to be a perfect illustration and schematic diagram of how to build it.
We are wanting the girls to participate in this so that they can see how the way we learn at CGS, where they're receiving a lot of feedback and iterating and changing things and going back and forth, collaborating with one another, they're now seeing how that happens in the workplace. So taking their learning and transferring it out of the school into a different place.
I believe a format like this tests kids' comfort with their design. There's a lot of stress in school to be perfect and have your first draft be immaculate, and so it's really the benefit of sketching something beforehand and having a little bit of that quantity to generate some creativity for it. And I think it's a little bit scary at first for kids, but the feedback I've been getting has been overwhelming and they really enjoy it.
The challenging part that I'm finding as a humanities teacher is the maker side of it. So having them do a lot of hands-on and building and design challenges doesn't come as easily for me. I'm really trying to integrate that, but that's harder. Nice work, ladies.
It's fall, and Adam Turner is already shifting his practice at Prairie Waters Elementary School.
It's been 6 weeks since I was in Shift Lab. Today we walked the kids through a design thinking process, and our main design was how do we get more student involvement in the community. Some challenges that have come up is the time commitment to reorganize and to rethink and rejig everything I wanted to do. It's a process for me too, because a lot of it is just framing the concept and explaining it to the kids, and then they take over. So that's probably the biggest shift is time, and then in class make sure I'm not the one talking as much. I think there's a challenge of just getting us outside of these classroom walls and saying, what can we learn here about, if I'm going to learn something about community, whether it's the environment or social stuff or anything that I'm learning in the classroom, what can I use to take outside the classroom?
One of the challenges facing us in the education system is having the engagement of our communities and our parents and having their understanding of the work that we're trying to do. And I find sometimes there's a blanket opinion of how education looks or should look.
It has been 5 months since Prairie Waters Elementary School teacher Adam Turner decided to take a new design-based learning approach that he learned at Shift Lab at Telespark into his classroom. The road has been challenging.
Whatever you pick is your idea, that's your idea you build a prototype of. I'd say the kids are adjusting to it a little bit slower. I thought they'd pick it up as something like, oh, this is totally a different way, possibly a better way to do it, whereas they're still going through the steps of actually thinking about something more in the realistic terms and going through different stages of that. So I think they're still struggling with that when we brainstormed yesterday and today. Hopefully, the more we practice it, the better they get at it. Pick which one you're going to do. It can be your own from yesterday. Today we kind of had an extension of our Shift Lab activity. So we're doing our project on how do you get community involvement from students. So we brainstormed a lot in November. We came up with different ideas and prototypes. Today's a follow-up to that. We've narrowed down some of our ideas and we built new prototypes, and we kind of played with different ideas with the prototype, what's going to be an effective idea for the community.
Hi, I'm Leanna, and my final way to pursue my idea is to make my own bottle depot one day and raise money to help kids with disabilities whose parents can't pay for their medical bills.
So think, how can you put your idea into a model, into a 3D model that you're making? We do have a stigma of failure. I mean, every year there's always parents legitimately ask me, hey, is my kid failing? I've tried to rephrase it as like, what areas can they improve in? I mean, everybody has areas they're struggling in. I don't really try to use the word failure, so when we talk about it in class, I find it's a lot of open discussion of, hey, you failed in that, let's figure out what we can do next. So I think to instill that fail positive attitude is just more dialogue about it, more reflection about it, and then just as it happens, keep reiterating it with the students, and that will help them continuously fail and hopefully continuously get back up with a positive mindset. I think it's easy to try to fall back and be like, oh, let's just go back with what works for me or what I know is easier for the students, but I find for me it was a challenge as a learner in the summer. The process was worth the product I got in the end at Shift Lab. So I guess I'm staying true to that, and I want to give the kids the full chance to go through that like I did and say, hey, maybe they'll look back on this and say, it was good we didn't give up on the second or third attempt we had this. Like, let's keep on going to see what we come up with.
The students at Prairie Waters aren't the only students taking risks. At the Calgary Girls' School, they are putting the fail-positive design thinking philosophy to the test. This is the first time the students' design prototypes have been shown to parents as a work in progress, rather than a finished product.
The biggest I guess two things that we've done so far this year that came out of Shift Lab is sort of design process and a design cycle in a lot of the work that we've done. And so at first it was really tricky to get the students to buy into jumping into a task without much guidance and trying things as ideas and prototypes. But I think in girls especially who search for that idea of perfection and they are often afraid to take risks, it's been challenging for some, but 2.5 months later they're getting pretty used to it, and I think that they're really seeing the value and the risk involved in presenting something that's not perfect.
You need to have up with your exhibit your first iteration, your first idea, and the other thing is you have 5 minutes left. Off you go. Tonight is the first time the parents are going to see this sort of design thinking. I don't know how they're going to react to it. I hope that they react positively. There are always people, as there need to be, who are really focused on why aren't you reading out of this book, or why hasn't this textbook come home? I feel like all the evidence you need to convince them is to look around the room at the level of the learning. They're not just reciting facts about Pythagorean theorem, they're applying it and they're really using it. So if I can't be convincing, I'm hoping what's happening around them will be convincing.
So, you want to try it?
That's going to be challenging. I was skeptical at first because I went to regular schooling that had a different style of learning, and my biggest concern was how that transition would be to high school. We really saw the girls being able to be a lot more proactive when it comes to their schoolwork. How she learns is different than other kids. Taught her independence at a very young age, as well as confidence at a very young age too.
These kids are going to have to be thinkers. They're going to have to problem solve all the time. The work that we do in schools has to be in that place where they're allowed to think, they're allowed to make mistakes, they're allowed to try, and when they try and it doesn't work, they don't quit. Because if that's the world that they live in, I worry that that will be a serious failure because they won't know how to bring themselves out. So the work they need to do today is see themselves as learners, be confident in themselves as learners, and know that, you know what, they can do anything they want to and feel good in that space. Be confident.
Getting students and parents used to this new design-based learning philosophy will take some time. Halfway through the year, the Shift Lab teachers reconvene at Telespark for workshops to continue their learning and share ideas with their cohort.
With a partner, I'd like you to come up with uses for those attributes. As many as you can, you have 5 minutes to do it. Go. At the core of being a designer for learning are the human beings that we're designing for. And in order to create really great learning experiences for students, we really have to focus on the humans that we're designing for. And in order to work effectively as a human-centered designer, you need to build empathy with your students. And empathy requires vulnerability. That's why we have a lot of exercises in Shift Lab that get teachers out of the box.
But if you get that to a book, right? We always take information, but what are we going to do with that to implement something that is personal for us, that we're passionate about?
Well, I think it'll be okay. Everyone is so excited and everyone is so creative. And it's just a nice reset button to come in and talk to people and step away from what we're doing in the classroom and hear what other people are doing. And talk to all these amazing people in this community.
It is about what we do. What we do is always fun and we're always able to take something back and use it. But I always leave feeling re-energized and more passionate than I was about what we're doing.
There are a lot of challenges of trying to do things differently. Human beings say they like change, they don't. It's really hard to not only foster change in your environment, but to be held up as an example of change. That's really challenging for the teachers. Shift Lab, having the cohort of other educators to support them is really important, so they can rely on each other for, hey, how do I communicate to a parent that meaningful learning is really happening here, even though it looks like the kids are playing? And they can work with their administrators as well to support other colleagues to better understand what's going on in the classroom and build that capacity within the school itself. In order to innovate, to push boundaries, to try new things, you really have to accept failure. It's part of the process. I love the phrase, failure sucks, but instructs, because it's important for us as humans to grow, learn, change, develop, and to create a better future for all of us.
It's June 2016, and school is almost over. But the benefits of Adam Turner's Shift Lab work will continue to pay off for years to come.
We have finally put into action our community ideas that we started back in October, so our original design thinking ideas. We are putting them into action. We have 5 groups around the school. 2 of the groups are gardening, so they each had 2 garden beds to fill out. One group is picking up garbage in and around the school. Another group was putting on a community play, and then the last group was a charity car wash.
We're running out of water, Caitlin.
The uncomfortable part for me, and what I had to become comfortable with, was just to let it go, let kids kind of succeed or fail on their own.
I like about what Mr. Turner does because he's trying to teach us that if we fail, it always happens to everybody. Everybody fails, but you can learn from your mistakes.
It's good that we did this on our own because with adults helping us with everything, if that happened, then we wouldn't learn new things. But with this, we got to learn new things and we got to try different things. So that was really interesting.
I find that learning that they'll have today will be far more influential than me saying 2 days or 3 days ago, say, hey, you should try this, it's probably going to work better.
Over at the Calgary Girls School, design-based learning is opening up brand new perspectives.
Today we have some girls working in our Learning Commons on a design cycle connected to some learning that they've been doing in science.
They've been doing environmental case studies, and their case studies have been connecting fresh and saltwater systems and cells and systems. And each girl has been looking at one of 5 different case studies. And today, some of them are doing presentations and some of them are doing design tasks related to their case studies.
Part of the design cycle is getting feedback and and using that feedback to iterate your ideas and change them and improve them. So I think something that I'm going to keep on using for other school years is always being open to getting feedback and not always being so attached to an idea, because sometimes you have to let it go because it doesn't always work.
The students that we've worked with this year, we also taught them in grade 7. So we followed them to grade 8, and seeing the differences in how they reacted to failing or things not turning out the way they wanted them to last year versus this year has been drastic differences. We've had girls who last year there may have been a lot of crying or a lot of beating themselves up, and this year they still have an expectation of themselves, but lots of times where they've been much more open to saying like, okay, maybe it didn't go the way I wanted, let's try this now.
At the beginning of the year, it was harder to remember that like getting up after you fail is such an easy thing to do. But then nearing the end, we got used to building and we got used to failing and we got used to trying again. And then trying again is sometimes can just be a really proud moment because you're like, yeah, now I get to start again. But now you had more information and knowledge to go with it.
I think my hope is that as the girls leave here, now that they've been exposed to this or part of it or engaged in it, that they will have the confidence now to be able to go out other places and take a risk and make a mistake and show other people why it's okay to do that exact same thing.
It's been a life-changing year for both teachers and students. It's now time to share what the teachers have learned and help a new group of educators shift their perspective on education.
We are grade 8 teachers from the Calgary Girls School. My name's Shauna Pascoe, and this is Jenny Lee Jones. We were members of last year's Shift Lab. The program's amazing. I'm sad that it's over. I drove in this morning to Telus Park thinking about this is our last day of Shift Lab. I think I learned about risk-taking and I learned about learning in a way that's not about product and not about perfection, but about the process.
And there's just something about the energy of this place and the people that are in this place that just make you feel like it's okay. Everything is okay. You can take a risk and you can do whatever, and that's been something that I think Shauna and I have both been able to take back and build within our team too.
The advice I'd give to the next cohort is be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And that was something that was said to one of us in the first week we were here, just a small session, and that's really resounded with me because you're going to do so many things that make you uncomfortable as an educator. It puts you back into the learner's seat, how uncomfortable we make learners and how uncomfortable learning can be for everybody. So be prepared to be like that, and then share that with your students and share how you personally did this in the summer. I'm going to ask you to do it now.
Adam Turner's Shift Lab experience was so successful, his Prairie Waters principal, Ryan Simons, has now signed up for the next cohort.
We know our students, to engage them, we need to teach differently and do more authentic things with kids, but I think as school leaders that we also need to do that with our teachers. So I think it's really important that I am well-versed and open to change and looking to grow and model that for my staff, as well as find out new engaging ways that I can engage them and change, and hopefully become risk takers, people who want to problem solve things, collaborate. And so they are role models for me, and I hope to be a role model back for them.
So it's not about throwing out what we've learned before. No, let's build on that. Let's take those different methods we have for teaching inquiry and design-based learning and help students with critical problem solving as well as creative problem solving. So it's about shifting practice in terms of perspective, having a growth mindset and being open to other possibilities.
These educators may have completed their year, but the benefits of their Shift Lab experience are just starting. Their new perspectives will profoundly impact dozens of schools, hundreds of students, and help prepare a new generation for a constantly changing world. This is Shift Lab.